Welcome back to Building Out Loud with me, Randy Silver, and
Faith Forster?
where every week we watch along as Faith builds Discoveree from the ground up, and I'm along for the ride, and so are you. And every week for the past few weeks, I've been asking Faith the same question to start off with, so I'll ask again. So, Faith, are you charging yet?
Not yet, because there's a very legitimate reason. I have worked out how much work is involved in getting this production ready. It is a lot across two instances. So we've got the EU hosted version as well as the US hosted version at the moment. I had payments set up, but it was all in the US hosted version. I realized I've had a few people testing it for me last week and realized the payments wasn't working properly on the EU version. But actually, that highlighted a whole bunch of other things that weren't quite working properly in the EU version. So, like, if you invited someone to your instance, it didn't know whether to then direct them, which instances to direct them to when they tried to log in or create an account.
It sounds way too complicated. Why don't you just launch with EU? Why don't you just launch with that first?
Yeah, that would have been a good way to start. Replit doesn't support EU hosting very well. And so it was all built in a US hosted environment. And then that's what I've had the engineer helping me with, is to then set up an EU hosted version, because otherwise no one in the UK or Europe can use it properly. We do have both, and it has created a lot of extra complication.
So this wasn't intentionally going maximalizing rather than thin slicing. This was, oh, this is how it works, and I need to make sure it works. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's just sort of going through and making sure it all. You probably picked up the last couple of weeks. I've been quite hesitant. I'm like, I just need to make sure it works. I wasn't really sure.
Mm.
And I've had a few people testing different parts, and my instinct was right. And now I understand it. I'm just going through and cleaning it all up and making sure it all works properly. The other side that I was really not confident on and have a much better sense of now is all the MCP connections. So DJ from Superbet, who's going to join us next week, was testing that for me, and it's partly working. It's pulling information through from, in his case, via Claude, from Notion, and tools that we really want to make sure it works. But it was a little bit confusing and difficult to set up. And so I'm just going through at the moment, and for all the obvious tools, setting those up so they're preset, basically. So you just say, yes, Notion, and it happens. There's quite a few gaps that I instinctively thought wasn't probably quite right, and now I understand it, and I'm just going through and making sure that all is seamless, because it's such an important part of the proposition.
So you said something a moment ago that I want to dig deeper on, but you were talking about the little bits of reticence that were coming through in the past couple weeks, and
Yeah.
if I had put my coaching hat on, I would have dug way deeper into that during the time. And you mentioned just before we hit record some doubts and some thoughts about this. And I think this is a really interesting one, because this is something that every founder I know goes through. And certainly I go through it with things that I work on as well. As you get to that point, you've done a bunch of work, you start off with a huge amount of momentum, and then you get to a point, it's like, should I?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
tell me a little bit more about where you are or where you were and how this has hit you recently.
So since Easter, I really felt like I'd lost momentum. There was a lot of other things going on that were a bit distracting, but also it kind of forced me to stop and pause and just think this through. And there's been a lot of talk about, SaaS is dead, and even in the product leader groups I'm in on WhatsApp, like, kind of felt like I'd missed the opportunity already, because I could see a lot of the product leaders starting to chat around, they're clearly gaining confidence on how to use AI and MCP connections and Claude and different tools. And we're talking a lot about what they were building themselves. And so I was just honestly like thinking, is this even worth launching? Like, people are potentially doing this themselves anyway, from a position of not really understanding exactly what they were doing or how they were embedding it. It sounds pretty impressive. Like, when you hear what people are working on, you kind of go, oh, wow, that's really cool. And so I was honestly kind of like, there's so much talk about the SaaS is dead and people will just build their own thing now. And I was thinking, I don't think that's true outside of the tech industry, but if your audience is the tech industry, then that's quite possibly true. And so I really wasn't sure whether or not I should even bother launching this, to be honest.
I honestly think that's a load of bunk, certainly at this stage. Because Martin Erickson, I think you and I were both at the same talk he did the other week. And the stat he keeps bringing up is, do you know how small a percentage of people have built anything with AI versus actually using it properly, not just a Google search with some search results? And it's a vanishingly small percentage of people. And the people in these WhatsApp groups, I'm in some of them with you as well, I think we're seeing the tip of the iceberg on this. And people are talking about the good stuff and not all the bad stuff. Products that work are hard.
Yeah.
Janky stuff that's a prototype that does a little bit is fairly easy. So I think the question is, are you actually solving a problem, and are you listening to your customer base or just surfing a little bit of the hype on top? And I'm curious. So you got this feeling from people that SaaS is dead, that people are just going ahead and building. Have you dug deeper? How do you get through that and see, is that signal or noise?
So what has changed? On Friday, we were both in a session. So the group that were in Product Land, one of the guys from that group who works for one of the major tech companies, shared what he has built to optimize how they're working within their tech business. And these guys have spent an eye-watering amount of money on credits. Like it is jaw-dropping how much they've spent. And in theory, they're some of the best tech people in the industry. And they have an absolute imperative. So it is very much a build with AI or you're out mentality. So they're all very actively exploring how to use AI. And the really interesting thing that came out of that for me is it's all very much at an individual level. It is optimizing for people's own personal workflows. And I mentioned that, and some others have confirmed that's what's happening in their businesses as well. And I honestly think that is a big part of the reason why businesses are not getting the return on the investment they're making in AI at the moment, because there's only so much you can benefit from making someone's admin a little bit better. What's missing from that is how AI is being used to support teams working better together and to drive business outcomes or to optimize for what the business is trying to achieve, which you're never going to do when there's just one person tinkering with their own workflows. There is a lot of complexity in building products that do support that teamwork or the business context. And that's really what Discoveree is about. And so what I've sort of gained from that conversation is a lot more confidence that actually what I've built is not easily replicable. You couldn't have someone just build it on top of Claude within their business. And actually there's a huge amount of value in it.
Yeah, this has always been an interesting one from the beginning of when we started these conversations. I was asking you, is this a product or is this a set of skills? Is this a feature that exists within this? Do you need to build the platform itself or do you need to build the skills for people? And it sounds like you've got a definitive answer for that now.
There's a lot in the product, and I was talking very much about features, but actually that's not the point. The point is actually more everything that comes around having a team and an organization being able to do work in a secure environment and share their data and use it in a way that is driving business outcomes and not just helping them with their meeting notes. There's so much more to supporting that process and building it in a way that people can actually collaborate together and focus on business outcomes is the big thing. So it's been really reassuring, actually. So I'm a lot more confident on it now.
It's interesting because almost everything we talk about in this space comes back to basic philosophy things. We talk about how all of this stuff optimizes, but it optimizes, as you say, for the individual flow. So it's going back to the myth of that 10x engineer or 100x dev kind of person, the rock star. And the initial wave of all this is about how we can shrink our teams and just one or two people to run a company or run a product area. And the reality is, the level of complexity of what we build, we have lots of large legacy organizations. They're not going to shrink down to a handful of people. We have lots of things where we do need lots of people, or we're going to build complex layered experiences to really do lots of different things. And that's not one or two people because the context is so high. So we're going back to communication and collaboration and prioritization at scale and outputs over outcomes. And this all feels very familiar to everything we've been doing our
Yeah,
entire careers.
it is. There's so much relearning, but also that's why we're doing the manifesto. It's trying to help people understand what is changing, what do we need to do different, actually what stays the same. And there is so much we've learned about how to do business in general, how to do tech businesses in the last decade or more, that a lot of it is still holds true, but we're having to revisit all those assumptions in that context. I've built this myself on my own for a number of months now. And in so many ways, the fact that I've managed to get a near production ready product that is quite complex done in a number of months is insane. But also, I'm shattered. The last few weeks, I've just been trying to recover. I'm so burnt out, and there's so many aspects. It's not just building the product. What's much more important now is the go-to-market side and building those relationships and getting word out there and getting people excited about what you're doing. And I've had so many conversations, and I've got lots of people saying, "When's it ready?" I'm happy to share it and put it with our audience or whatever. But I just haven't had the energy. I've just been really burnt out. And so I kind of had to stop and just give myself some space to recover. And that's when you really clearly see the limitations of a one person team, because nothing happens if you're not doing it.
I know personally the things I get most excited about, the things that I do best, are the ones that are collaborations with other people.
Yeah.
There's a certain amount I can build up on my own, but then yeah, I get to that point, and sometimes I come back to it, and sometimes I don't.
Yeah.
But when I've got someone else that is either an accountability partner or someone else that is collaborating, it ends up pacing us both, and we'll go through peaks and troughs of energy and build off of each other. But I don't seem to burn out as much on these things.
I honestly don't think I would have got this far if it weren't for the fact that we're doing this together, because it holds me accountable, it keeps me on track, it pushes me. It's also really helped. There's people who are listening to this, and you see them at events and they're like, oh, we're really rooting for you. Like, this is so inspiring what you're doing and amazing. You're being so open about the whole process, which is like, yeah, it makes you want to keep going. If it was just me doing this on my own, I wouldn't have gotten this far. I don't think I would have given up already.
Well, I heard one other thing in what you were saying, which is something you've pivoted on a number of times, or let's say evolved on a number of times, which is the way that you are presenting this, the way you're positioning it. Because you were talking a lot early on, you had a couple of different iterations, but what you're talking about right now is what it does for your customers. And there's a combination of it surfaces certain specific information and alignment, but it also keeps them working together
Yeah.
as a team well. It's the organizational alignment or something like that. But how would you phrase that now? Is that evolving again?
Yeah, it is. I've moved away from the AI Chief Product Officer companion for a couple of reasons. Chad, who's been busy on some other client work, came back. He's like, oh, I don't know about this because it could be a bit threatening, but it's also a bit clear about the product isn't actually for the CPO. Like, so is it replacing the CPO? Is it for the CPO? Is it, which was not the point. The point was it's meant to support the whole product, like anyone working on the product within the organization. And so I was moving away from that. What I've done now is, so I'm very much positioning it as the outcome it's driving, which is to make better product decisions faster, but together. And that's become far clearer to me in the last sort of day or two. And so I'm going to add that to the headline. I also got some feedback from an old growth marketing colleague of mine who was saying the website was too complicated, there's too much information, not really clear, which, like, I was still trying to work out beyond features what the proposition was. And so I've reworded that and clearly positioning around three core things. So driving strategic context, automating product workflows, and driving towards commercial goals are the three content things, I guess, from a product perspective. But the other two that are really important is supporting collaboration and then the connectivity with your other tooling so that it's pulling the data and connecting the picture for everyone, which is just far clearer, I think. I've also purchased Discoveree.com.
Well, hey,
I don't think I mentioned that because there is another product called Discoveree, which is quite a niche product, but still talks about product intelligence, annoyingly. And so I've purchased Discoveree.com, and I'm thinking about changing the branding so it's always referred to as Discoveree.com, just to make that really, really clear, knowing that brand name.
so the other thing you mentioned that you're feeling a little bit burnt out, you've been recovering, that you're getting ready to get to full production launch, but there's still some barriers between here and there. How are you managing your time? What's the next week or two look like for you in terms of this? Where do you expect to get to?
So this week, I have nothing else on, which I'm so happy about. It's been weeks of craziness. So I'm just really looking forward to having a whole week where I can just put my head down and just get some stuff done. I'm not going to make promises like I have about having it done by the end of this week because I really do need to go through and make sure it was working properly.
Well, I should pause on the are you charging question for a couple weeks. We'll come back to that.
I do have a few people who are actively helping me in terms of just testing and making sure it was working within their organization. I'll continue to work with them to get it to the point where there's no holes. And then once I've got that confidence around it, I think the launch in inverted commas will be much softer. So just as I said, there's a few people who are waiting and ready to share it with their networks or their audiences. And so I think I'll just do it sort of step by step and less of a big bang launch and more introducing it into those groups. One of the other interesting things that's come up, it's one of the things that's been bubbling there, but I had the light bulb moment around it on Friday. So the product leader, I guess, is the obvious audience, but they have a lot going on, right? They're always busy. They've got multiple things they're trying to focus on at any single point in time. So they're a difficult audience to get attention from, I guess, and to the point where they actually try something. What's become clear from other conversations I've had is product ops people are probably a better first target because their actual job is setting up these workflows. And at the moment, it's very much driven around AI and how they help product teams use AI better for their workflows or to optimize what they're doing and make it more streamlined as well. And so I heard a product ops person on Friday saying that that's exactly what they're trying to do right now. That's their entire objective. And so that's really interesting. And that when I get to the point where I've got this live, I'll probably start focusing more on product ops people first and see how we go there.
That makes sense. That's interesting. So your IP is an organization of a big enough size that it's hired a product ops professional
Yeah.
to be part of this, or someone specifically in that role. That helps define. So it's a certain level of maturity in the organization that it knows it needs this. It's a certain amount of size and cash flow.
Yeah. And they're also the people who can't just build something on top of Claude, right? There is complexity in the organization that they're trying to cut through. So I think that will be really interesting. I think that will be my primary. I still think there's some value for like founders and earlier stage businesses, but probably not where I'll focus initially.
Makes sense. It does come with additional complexity around payments and procurement and things like that, but that's another issue to deal with. That's another week.
It's actually something I've been wondering about is I've said a couple of times that it needs customer success support. It's designed and set up so that you can sign up and just use it online. I think I do need to add into that flow the ability to set up a call and have someone take them through the product and help them get set up, basically.
I think that's actually a really key thing, and it's part of your leading metrics for success for adoption. From the time of first use, how quickly are they actually scaling up and putting it into things? And there's a lot that goes with it. I mean, I know this isn't that complex in a setup. I've had to play with it, but it's still, I think it's a bit complex in adoption. Like everyone is so specific of how their org works and what they do. So how do I put this into my day to day and make this a habit? And that's a critical thing.
Yeah, it's one of the things that became really clear from my conversation with DJ, and we can talk to you next week. It's getting clear on the taxonomy within the business and how that fits within Discoveree. So, particularly where you've got multiple products, multiple brands, multiple tribes, like it's helping people think that through and what that means and how they set it up in the best possible way.
I had this exact conversation last year with John Cutler about his new business, and they're doing something very different than Discovery, but it's very much about managing alignment within product teams and making things work. And it's so configurable.
Mm.
And he's got brain as big as a planet, things coming out, different ideas and taxonomies coming out all the time. But then he's dealing with massive customers who are very, very specific in what the language is in their organization. And so making sure that everything actually works the way that that org does that's harder than making the product itself work.
Yeah, I think there'll probably be a lot of learning out of all that. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, we'll check in on all of that next week. We'll chat with DJ and we will continue to review how things go towards. Let's talk about the first paying customers rather than are you charging?